as far as nominees go onto the slate. I was telling Jennifer earlier in preparation for the call, in years past, and Sheila might be able to attest to this, is often we would have, so you serve, we have classes that rotate through, and you serve a 4-year term in the class unless you go into the officers corps. And several times, for various reasons, we would have to have somebody drop out in the middle of their term. And so if you're appointed to fulfill that term, you're then eligible to fulfill another full term. You all have been, and our board here lately has been so engaged that we haven't had anybody drop out. And so we're faced with a situation where we've had people who come to the end of their term who've been highly engaged, and what kind of spots would we have to help keep them active on the board or over maybe on the foundation board in some way. So it's been really great to have this kind of engagement going on with this group.
Okay. I was telling Scott, that's a good problem to have. I do remember early in my term on the board, we did seem to have a few more folks who weren't able to complete their term, and it kind of creeps up on you. But when I think about it, I have noticed that in the past 3-4 years, we have a board that I think is very engaged. So that's a good thing for us. So you see on the, if you're like me, you're on your laptop and you're reading Scott's memo on your phone. But the list, of course, of the outgoing terms expiring in November is, of course, Anthony, Denny, Dee Davis, and Alyssa Keller. And then we can discuss further on those. Does anybody on the committee have any questions about the general process before we start discussing any potential board members or potential officers? Do you have any questions about the process? Nope. Okay.
And for everybody, at the bottom of that memo is the legislative references to how this works, just for your information. But if you have any questions, be glad to try to help answer those.
Yeah.
Jennifer, I think I served on this committee once before, and I found it very, very enlightening, and actually it was very rewarding. I thought we had gathered several times during that timeline just to banner around different names and areas of geographic. Are we planning on doing that as well with this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we will have to. It's that kind of process.
Yeah. Okay.
Definitely is. Absolutely. And before we end today, we can, hey, Sheila's joining us. Awesome.
Actually, Jennifer, I've been on. I cannot get my video to work. I'm afraid to do too much because I don't want to lose you all. But I have been on.
Okay. Lost my train of thought there. So before we end today, we will discuss a potential next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we get to the point of discussing specific potential board members, that's a point at which it's appropriate and allowed under the open meetings law for us to go into closed session. And so if I'm gonna read the statute and ask if anybody else on this committee would like to make the motion to go into closed session. And it's KRS 61.810. section 1, paragraph F, which reads, discussions or hearings that might lead to the appointment, dismissal, or discipline of an individual employee, member, or student. However, general personnel matters may not be discussed in private. And so that's why I wanted to make sure that during this open session that we discuss anything about the process, the timeline, philosophies, things like that. But if any of you would like to go into closed session and discuss some potential members, we can entertain a motion.
Sheriff, would you rather, before we look at that, to maybe go over a little bit about our current dynamics of our board makeup of when we look down those diversity metrics that we've kind of set outside geographic, profession, race, gender, and I don't have it popped up in front of me, but and Teresa, I don't know, I'm having a hard time locating it in my file, but I know that you've updated that fairly recently. And maybe we could go through that real quick, Jennifer, and then go into a scenario where we start kind of talking about certain names that might.
And we can delay speaking about specific potential individuals until the next meeting, if that's the preference as well. Okay. If everybody wants some time to think about it. But yes, Scott, go ahead.
Teresa, do you know where I might find that? I can share a screen with that.
Sorry, I muted myself. It's on the general information. It's race, ethnicity, gender, occupational discipline, geographic representation, and age.
But do we have what our current makeup is of the board? How our current board fits in that?
I have last year's, but I don't have the current this year. That includes the current ones that'll be going off. But I can share that with this committee afterwards to where we're at.
Okay.
And most things were pretty well balanced. Most things. But.
Just a quick point of clarification. We have no vacancies on the governing board right now, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
And actually, I'm noting in my notes that Mr. Davis is actually fulfilling an unexpired term, so he would be eligible to fulfill another whole 4-year term.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw that. Okay.
And so that was my question. So can we start just by making sure that we put Mr. Davis on the list, or is that something we do in a closed session?
We can ask Mr. Davis what his pleasure is.
So I know that I was asked to come on after the flood in Eastern Kentucky, and I think there was some concern about particularly loss of archives at Appleshop, Hyman Settlement School, and then we were engaged in documenting the flood, and so it was important that there be some voice from, I think, from East Kentucky. And when Mr. Nykirk was leaving the board, I think it was suggested, he asked me for names of possibilities, and I gave him a list of names, and then he got back and said, no, we don't want any of these names. We want to know if you would do it. So this was my feeling is I very much love the activity and would be available, but I don't, I'm not sure. I certainly fit the profile for the need 2 years ago when there was specific concern about those archives and knowing what's here in Appalachia. And so if it makes sense, I could serve again, but I also think that we should go through the criteria and see if how the board will be best served.
Well, have what has happened? I would appreciate, and it doesn't have to happen in this meeting, an update on where we are with those archives in Eastern Kentucky.
Sure.
So, Jennifer or Scott, you may know, and maybe this is something we can do on the agenda, because until Mr. Davis brought that up, it's like, oh yeah, we have short memories. So it'd be great to have an update on what we were able to save, what you still need to have done. I mean, all those things I think are important. You're talking about my neck of the woods over there in Hazard. So we're kind of used to this idea of annual flooding, but what happens when to save these records? So this may be another meeting, but it would be nice to have an update.
Well, and Teresa, if you can help me remember, we could also put that on our agenda for the July 19th board meeting. I think that would be a really good discussion to do with the broader group. To talk, just to get an update about where that is, and maybe Dee can help us with pulling that together. Some of our team, and we've had some staff turnover from the teams that were engaged a couple of years ago on that project have moved on. So for us, it would be picking back up where I think there's members of KDLA and UK, and I think even the Arts Council was highly involved at that point. But get you all an update and be able to provide that at that July 19th board meeting.
Okay. And before we let Dee off the hook completely, I want to mention that I did not have a keen memory of our desire for Dee to be on the board as it related to the archive recovery related to the flood. I remember that Dee is an excellent representative of all rural communities, whether they are in far western Kentucky or central Kentucky or eastern Kentucky. So that's my memory of why he represents an important group that needs to be considered in Kentucky.
Nice dodge effort, Davis. Not working.
Yeah. Mm.
And not to Jennifer, if you don't mind, I've pulled up last year's report that we created to show the demographics of the governing board at that time. And I won't go through it in detail, but if you don't mind, I'm gonna share my screen for just a minute and just kind of let everybody see how we have it set up. Because it's a useful tool when we have future discussions about this. And it just gives you an idea of how, not necessarily tells us what to do, but it just makes sure that as we're making decisions and recommendations, what impact that will have on these. So if that's okay with you, I'll go through that relatively quickly.
Thank you.
Now, if I can just remember how to do it. My maybe I can't. Oh, there it is. Can you all see that screen that has 2023 KHS Governing Board demographics at the top of the page?
Yes.
Okay. So just real quickly, Teresa had mentioned we have our gender diversity, and so we were looking at what it was at the current, and then what it was going to be for those who were rotating or whose terms were ending. And then we had racial diversity, and that again, that's also based upon those who are willing to share that information with us on their demographic profile. We look at regions by tourism region. Couldn't quite just do Eastern Kentucky, Western Kentucky. So we looked at what the different tourism regions were within there, and that somewhat serves a challenge. So and maybe I'll say that after I get through the presentation. We look a little bit at occupation. So one of our goals is to bring people onto the board that have both maybe knowledge of Kentucky history, but there's also who can help get us to other people who will be willing to support or be part of the activities that we do. And obviously through our one-on-ones that we've been doing with Cynthia, there's obviously a lot of a diverse range of motivations of why you've chose to join the board. So we also look at what occupations people bring to us. We've started on doing some age diversity. There's been several comments of us looking at how do we attract younger people to both as members of KHS, and so that starts some on the leadership as well. And I think that was my last one. So as we go through this process, and Tony, as you mentioned, you've done this before, and you might remember, one of the challenges we run into is it's not necessarily mirroring the person that is leaving the board. So it's gonna kind of have to move things will move around because you're not always going to find the same demographic checkpoints for the person that's leaving the role from whatever, the bluegrass region. And so just keep that in mind as we go through this. This is going to ebb and flow. One of the things I would argue is that we should be looking at this on the same terms of people that are involved in the Military History Museum Committee, the Oral History Commission, and all the other attached leadership opportunities that have with us, maybe not just the governing board. So that's give you a little, Teresa will update this, and by our next meeting, we'll have this to help be a tool to guide us as we make decisions about potential selections.
Scott, can you go back to the slide on racial diversity, and then after that on geography?
I think that's it, correct? Yeah. The blue
Okay.
box.
Scott knows that I have been a broken record on this point. See, smiling. That if we don't work on our racial diversity with each nominating committee year after year after year, it's hard to make any progress in that area. So I think that's a key consideration for this group. And then, Scott, may I look at the geography again?
And I don't want to make people, I'm going to try enlarging it a little bit. There, does that help?
It does, yes. This it is a bit self-serving on my part, but on the Western Lakes and Rivers region, is that from like Hopkinsville all the way west, pretty much?
Hang on, I think I had and Teresa, you might, if you know it better than me.
Okay.
Did a map just pop up on your screen?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay. Okay.
Let me, and I don't know if I can make, so you can kind of see what those different regions are.
Right.
And okay, so Southern Lakes is number 5. Okay. So we seem to be blank in that space. We don't really have anybody from that area.
Actually, we do now. Mr. Hoover is from number 5.
Okay.
Okay. What about in number 9? Other than me, because I see you've got Powell County there.
You, Mr. Davis,
Okay.
and Dr. Allen.
Got you. Okay.
Okay.
So one person from 5.
Correct.
And one person from 1, and when
Yes,
Keller rolls off, there'll be none.
correct.
Hmm.
Teresa, when you update those numbers and you send that to us, can you include this map in it?
Please.
Yes.
It's really helpful. Thank you. So what is everybody else thinking about these different areas? I don't mean just the geographic areas. I mean all the areas of a person's makeup that we consider.
Well, I has David Childs been to any of our meetings yet, other than just, I think he attended the last one via live stream, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so was that his first meeting?
No.
Yeah.
I know he's active. He has a lot of students. So when we're talking about age and trying to attract youth, what age group are we thinking? We're thinking college age students, maybe those that are in some preservation programs. What's the thinking of everybody?
I would be tickled if we could just get some more 30-year-olds.
30
But-
year.
You know, I mean, 20s as well, but
Well, I think David might be somebody worth discussing. I think he does graduate work. He might have some graduate students who are in the field of preservation that might be interested in this. I always found that having a connection to the History Society, if no matter if you're doing preservation, anthropology, all those things, having the connection with the Historical Society is always good. You find so many new things just by having those connections.
And
okay.
Alistine, I think you're going down the exact route that we normally do is at some point, we'll start to identify which of these, both geographic, but what are some of these metrics that we're trying to get to? And then maybe it's not that person, but we identify people that can help us find others that can come in. Tony, I can't remember, were you part of Mark Nykirk, was Mark Nykirk part of the group that got you to KHS? Or I know Leadership Kentucky was a key piece. So again, we're finding people that help us find people at some point here.
I think it was Constance,
Yeah.
Scott. Hey,
Yep.
let me ask, we obviously are heavy in the bluegrass region, and I think I saw the number was 7, maybe.
Yeah. Do you want me to go back to that? I can go back to that.
Please do.
Maybe Teresa, you would know, and if Scott doesn't, have we always been representative that high in that region? 8, actually. Has that always been a high?
It fluctuates, but that usually is our largest region because it's easiest distance for most people to travel because Mr. Davis, Dr. Turley, this is a long haul for some of you to come to Frankfurt, when we have our meetings here quarterly. But mainly it has been, we have tried, we used to have maybe some of that broken up by the Louisville Lincoln region where we had 2 or 3 there. But as you see, we're down to 1. That's Cynthia. And so usually it runs anywhere from like 4 or 5 to up to, this is probably the most now. Beth Milburn, who sits on the board, that is by statute because she represents the State Libraries, Archives and Records Commission, and her office is here in Frankfurt. So that one's not really one that we can play with. So if you really discount hers, that's the only way, the best I can explain that one to you.
Okay, and is that correct? We only have 1 from the northern Kentucky area?
At the current time, yes.
Currently, yes.
Gee, I have I have several people that I could contact, diverse individuals that could fit the profile from that area. If that's what you're trying to recruit, I agree that that Western Kentucky looks pretty scarce. And the but yeah, that kind of shocks me a little bit. But especially the Northern Kentucky, wasn't Mark from that area?
Yes.
Mark was,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's so like I said, sometimes it ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's when we're reaching out to folks because we have particular initiatives or things going on, and it just naturally gravitates towards a certain region of people that can help us or influence just the different activities we have going on. Again, what you're looking at isn't updated with the current board listing, so because I know there's some names missing off of there. So yeah, we'll get that updated and that'll kind of show you. The other challenge you run into are because of the number of geographic regions we're working with, not every time do we have somebody that as it rotates off, it rotates back on, or we refill the spot. If we're going more for maybe there's an occupational thing that we're looking for, and the person doesn't necessarily line up with the geographic representation that we were looking to get. I think when you see the low numbers, actually outside the Louisville, Lincoln region, normally we have more than that. But a lot of times it ends up being one person from the Western, from the Green River, from the Cave region, from the Southern Kentucky Lakes region. Northern Kentucky's a little low. Usually we get at least one or two, I think, from there.
Can you go back to the profiles of the people again? I did notice two of the business people. Do we have any in the medical that are medical doctors?
I don't think we have any for a while.
We've had them in the medical field, but not necessarily as doctors.
Okay, I just was wondering, if that, because of the profession, maybe they can dedicate the time and the effort because of the weird schedules and so forth.
Yeah.
Okay. Good feedback, really good feedback. So let me get this straight. So Southern Lakes region and Rivers region, that is that on the map, that's represented by region 1.
No.
What?
That's
Oh, 5.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay, we're talking Cumberland area, all those and all. Okay, the lake. Okay, gotcha.
See, several things. I'm just looking at this map, and of course, my mind always goes back to the Underground Railroad, but all of those states, all those counties along that southern border were so critical, especially in Region 5. You had a lot of anti-slavery Presbyterians in that area that really fed escapes that came up through Region 5, 7, and 6. So I just have to believe there are people in that area that would do well on this board.
I agree. I do agree. And right there across the river there, you got that wonderful facility there. Yeah, I agree.
Gosh. What historical societies do we have in that area, Scott?
You talk about in Region 5?
5, yeah. Do we have any historical societies in that area?
Kind of.
There's the African American History Center in Laurel County, which is culturally in 5, but is here in 9.
Yeah, there used to be a gentleman there who was very active. I can't think of his name right now, D, but you might know him.
Yeah,
He worked in rural, in farming areas, about Black farmers in this area.
if
Does
it's the
that
same
ring a
person, we just gave the East Kentucky Leadership Award to the director of the history, the African American History Center there in London. And I think
Okay.
I'm trying to find his name.
The only, and you know, I'm sure there's some names out there. I know that there's a history museum in Greene County. But I think a real big sign is, you know, which of these groups which of these places have we actually interacted with, or people that we've interacted with? You know, in a lot of cases, all of you have kind of come to us from either some involvement with the work that we were doing or are doing, or at least some knowledge of the work that we're doing. So I think one of the key points I'd like to try to keep looking at is somebody that's coming on the governance committee and on the foundation board. It would be great if this wasn't their first call from
Right.
us.
Right.
That they've already been involved with us in some way so that they know what we're doing and they're behind, you know, what the mission is that we're trying to put out there. And so how do we identify people in these areas that are already kind of in that route? And my guess is they have been. We find this, you know, we're coming up on the giving out the Kentucky History Awards, and every time we do it, I know that there are people out there doing some work and they didn't apply to receive an award. So how do we get that message out that this is an opportunity to get involved here? So
Well, along that line, Scott, I wonder if we could look at the list of award recipients, you know, from the last 2 years,
yeah,
and maybe even nominees. Is that a list that we could get and plow through?
we could. Yep.
And while y'all were mentioning museums, I wanted to mention a couple of months ago, I was invited to come speak to the Trigg County Historical Society. They have a new museum in downtown Cadiz, and those folks are active.
Yeah.
You know, Trigg County's population is probably a third of Christian County's population. And I was standing before that group speaking, and I thought, boy, Christian County would kill to have a historical society this large. I'm making fun a little bit, but it was a good group, and there were some young folks there too.
I tell you, those counties along that border, when you look at early Kentucky history, I mean, this is where a lot of the early African American schools developed. McCreary County, where black coal mining became a thing in company towns. So, I mean, there's a lot going along that border. And seeing the list might be helpful. I might recognize some names on there of people I've worked with, but I also remember when we were doing the Lincoln Commission work, it seems like this was an area that where a lot of African Americans and diverse people were actually involved, and it's not an area of Kentucky we normally think about.
Yep. You know, that's something, I'm glad you said that, because it reminds me that as we're doing this, and again, this kind of hopefully helps Steve out as we get closer to, well, not closer, as we're starting to think about the grant program for the America 250, we are naturally going to be engaging with hopefully communities across the Commonwealth in ways that we haven't done since probably the Lincoln Bicentennial. And so that should, while it might not help your all's charge for this year, it will certainly help us get engaged with people for future activities or for future possible service on the board. But it should get us better connected into these groups that aren't quite top of mind right now.
What are we thinking, Jennifer? Are we?
So I mean, I
I
feel
could
like
just
we've
think
set
of
ourselves up for
Oh,
some
I'm
good
sorry. Go ahead.
I think we've set ourselves up for some good homework. Um, and I'm not trying to end this meeting if that's what it sounds like, but between the information that Teresa's going to provide for us, and some work that each of us could do individually, is there any thought about looking at this map at our particular regions or regions that we're familiar with because of work, and finding some folks and then coming back again to meet?
Yeah, that's a good idea, Jennifer. One thing, we're all rah-rah cheerleaders for KHS, and I just think about several years ago, and I'll use him as an example. Tommy Druin just said, "My God, I saw you were on the governing board of KHS. Tell me more about that and what's it like?" Because that's something that really interests me. Just generally talking to somebody about what we do can help you find people.
Yeah.
Dr. Allen was the same way. I had known her from Leadership Kentucky, and she came to me one time and said, "My God, that looks like a great organization." You know, we are the cheerleaders, and we can find good people.
Yeah.
One thing I'll throw out there is I have connections up in Region 6. So if that's an area that we want to look at, I can make a few contacts easily in that area.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think also we don't ever we take for granted that states have historical societies, and I was shocked to find out that not every state has organizations like this one. And so I almost feel like we underplay our value, Scott, quite a
Yeah.
bit, because other than the state of Indiana and maybe Illinois, I don't know of any other state that has an operation the way we do. Does that sound, I mean, you would know because you go to these national conferences, but am I wrong in my thinking?
There's a pretty active group. I mean, the Tennessee Historical Society in Nashville, they're pretty active, or through the state. I mean, there's the Tennessee Historical Society, but then there's the Tennessee State Museum, which covers a whole lot of that. Ohio and Columbus, Ohio History Connection is their version. The thing that's different about each of them, they kind of have a different flavor. So the Indiana Historical Society is primarily archival.
Right.
They have a museum, but quite frankly, they don't do their museum work. They don't measure their success by the number of people who visit the museum. It is a great engagement tool for supporters and funders of Indiana history. So each of us have our kind, and we're unique. We don't have the Heritage Council under our umbrella. We're good partners, but and we also don't manage sites. A lot of historical societies, or some of the historical societies, I think Illinois just recently picked up sites. Tennessee doesn't. But anyhow, like the one that Kent went to, Minnesota, I mean, they manage 26 sites or 23 sites. And those are primarily through the Park Service here. So each of us have our own uniqueness about them. But you're right. I think there's a part that and I appreciate what Tony was saying. And let me share this with you all. I was mentioning this to our team. I don't know that I've ever had as many calls to me directly within the last couple of months of people going, "I'm interested in being on your historical society board. Tell me more about how I do that."
Okay.
We're I feel fortunate that we're in a good position to have, when people are starting to come to us to ask versus us having to go out and recruit, which I'm thankful when people have done that for us. But I think our efforts to raise our profile and be engaged in the communities is starting to pay off because people are now sending people to us. because they see it. So I actually spoke with somebody this morning from Region 6. She's the alumni engagement director, and she's doing their annual fund for Thomas More University.
Mm,
Um, and then I've had a couple of others. I was just doing an email back to Crit Llewell, and she had somebody that she sent our way, not for board service, but they want to be involved with us in some way. So trying to find the right way to plug those folks in. But again, we're having people coming to us, which is, as Jennifer knows, she's been doing this for a long time, and Sheila knows, I don't know that we've had that to this degree for quite some time.
But
I think this is an important time for us nationally when history and the assaults on history and diversity and education, all those things are under attack. And I do worry sometimes that this may become the only way this sort of education makes it to students at all. So I think the profile of the Historical Society is only going to grow as things become shut out of the school system or the educational system. So that's something to think about too.
That's a great point. Excellent point. I just spent 2 weeks in Europe, and granted, I was doing historical tours, but these people that were doing these tours for us were all history aficionados. They knew everything and anything about what they were talking about, and it was so enlightening to hear them talk with the passion that they did, good and bad, you know. But so I appreciate that point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
As a former history professor, I can tell you it's hard to get anybody excited about history. So the fact that people are coming to you, Scott, is a big credit.
Well, we've
So,
got a great team here. I got high five as I was going to get a glass of water out of our break room. There was a school group there, and these kids were high fiving me.
so I want to say, last week I was down on the border in Texas, kind of between the Rio Grande and the wall, talking to people who direct descendants of the people who were leaders in the Underground Railway across the Rio Grande, and I kept thinking about the Ohio River. Yep. And the same kind of slave catchers, the same kind of activities that went on both places. And I thought, God, wouldn't this make a great movie to look at the parallels, and especially because there are people now coming across, Ukrainians and Chinese and Central Americans who are coming across the river the other way. And so I just thought, man, what's a good story? And I think, and
you know, Dee, who they sent down to that border to protect? United States colored troops from Kentucky.
I do know that. I do know. We talked about it. That's right.
So yeah, there's a big Kentucky, Texas story down there. And in fact, I'm working on a piece for that now, but there's so much of this history that's fascinating and touches directly to what we're doing here in Kentucky. So we got a lot.
I want to be mindful of everybody's time. There's one other tool that we will continue to update. And over the years, we have amassed a list of potential prospects that people have recommended. We've tracked them in an Excel sheet, and we've also tried to track demographics as much as we know them. I don't feel comfortable maybe sharing it in the open meeting just because these folks wouldn't have any knowledge that we're discussing them. But that's something that you all could certainly take a look at. And maybe at our future meeting, I'd be happy to go through them. Teresa and I, as we get names, including the more recent ones, we add them to the list just so that they become part of our ongoing discussions. And it also includes who recommended or how did they get to us. So there's a good way to follow back up with them if that would be the case. And so, Steve, this also would apply for you all. I think there might be some names on there that you would be, your group would be very interested in. And we also try to keep track of those as we go forward.
So how many names should we be thinking about? How many?
Sorry, I just popped the list up. Right now, we're looking for, you're going to be filling 4 officer positions, but all your officers are eligible for reelection, and you have to fill 4 the class positions, 4 4-year terms.
Well,
In simple terms.
I think the lesson that I've learned from serving on this committee before, and I know Tony, you have as well. We need several names to consider at the beginning, and here's another big lesson. We need to move this process along, so we don't want to wait very long before our next meeting. I think if each of us came back with, 3 or 4 solid names, that sounds like a good mix to me. I think it's okay if we naturally gravitate toward the region that we're in, or as Tony said, the region that he knows well. You mentioned 6, right?
Right, that's correct.
So if we want to look at that map one more time, I know that we're thinking about the region that Louisville's in. We're thinking about that Lakes region number 5. We're thinking about Western Kentucky region 1, and then Northern Kentucky region 6. I'm not limiting it to this. I'm just saying that I've heard in this discussion today that we might want to consider especially finding some folks in those regions. Somebody stop me if I'm rambling and not making sense.
No, this is very helpful, Jennifer. Thank you.
I will say too, and it's normally we have overrepresentation in 4. We're very light in 4 right now.
Yeah, that's why I just said Louisville.
I didn't know if you'd said that.
To that in Louisville, obviously. Yeah.
Usually that's not a problem or something we have to keep on our forefront, but here lately it has been.
Well, I'm comfortable saying that I can come back to the next meeting with 4 possibilities from region 1.
Okay.
And if any of the others want to chime in and say what you're anticipating bringing back.
I can come back with 3 or 4 names as well, Jennifer. No problem.
And you're talking about region 6?
I'll do 6, primarily 6, but if I can find somebody in my own region right now, I might have one person for that as well.
Okay.
And remember, we will take all of your recommendations and keep a list of them. It may not be this year,
Yep.
but it may be a year or 2 down the line that we want to reconsider them.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Or we could put them on the foundation board. Let them bide their time.
Right.
That's another good point. Thanks, Steve.
Wow.
Alistine and Dee, what are y'all thinking?
I'm just I'll have to really go through my notes and try to remember who I know in region 9. And Dee, I might give you a call. Is Mr.
Sure,
Davis?
that'd be great. I'd love to talk to you anyway. Yeah, I'll come up with a few names.
Yeah,
Okay.
me too, because I know there's some important groups in that region 9, and I put down region 5 as well. So yeah, maybe between the 2 of us, we could come up with a list of folks.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Jennifer, when do you think we should reconnect?
Is the first full week of June too soon for y'all?
So,
I think I'm good. I should be.
Scott?
It works for me.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we want to try to pick a time and day right now?
Well, and let me, maybe, it would work if I'm, in, Maysville on Sunday and Monday. So we have Kentucky History Day on the 1st, and then the 2nd and 3rd is Kentucky Museum and Heritage Alliance up in Maysville. And then I'll be back Tuesday through Friday.
What do Wednesday and Thursday, June 5th and 6th look like for y'all?
Right now, that's open on my calendar.
Mine as well. Either one of those.
It works for me also.
Hey, Chief.
I'm open. I'm open.
Okay. Well, let's say Wednesday, June 5th. What time? Do y'all like this time?
This
Sure.
works.
Yeah.
2 o'clock your time, 1 o'clock slow time?
Yeah.
We're slow people over here, you know. In
It's
Western.
not slow, it just takes the sun another hour.
Okay, so 2 o'clock on Wednesday, June 5th.
Correct. I'm excited, guys. I've served on nominating committees before, and I just feel very good about this.
Well, shout out, thanks to Teresa for helping me keep track of all this information. We've been compiling this now for how long, Teresa? Quite some time. And it's helpful, to keep the conversation moving. Steve, you and I maybe can connect, here soon about, because the foundation annual meeting will be coming up that first part of June too. And see if there's any prospects we already have on the list. I've got a couple of ideas to float your way already.
Scott, if you send any information out for this meeting, I didn't get it either.
Okay, I'll make sure we'll get you all connected and get us all caught up. I think the 3 primary pieces that you all should expect to see is I'll resend out this general information piece, so you just kind of know how the timeline of things that how that works. And then it includes current what our complement is that we have to fill. And then we'll send out the demographics information, updated demographics information with those considerations. And then I'll send you out the prospect list as we've compiled it so far.
And Sheila, let me know just send me an email, which email address you would prefer this stuff to come to.
Okay, either one's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else before we adjourn?
We're good. Dee, do I have a list of phone numbers of everybody? If I do, or Teresa, if you could send me Mr. Davis's contact info, I will call you right back.
Immediate action item. Look at it go.
Yeah. God, I get involved in other things and drift away. So
No, I'm with you. If I don't do it right away, then.
Yeah. Okay. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
second.
All in favor? Aye.
Bye.
Aye.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Good to see
Great
everybody.
stuff.
Great.
Bye now.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.